Hi, Vincent Hall drawers and painters. Today's drawing lesson is going to be a sequence from the last several drawing lessons that we've had. And just to review, I thought I would just share a reminder. First, we started doing our basic pencil trees using lines and shading, which we then moved on to pen and ink and doing different colors in here with the pen and ink. And at the same time we did that, we were also working on color with those same trees, adding lines, using whatever materials that you happen to have at home. Today, as promised, we're going to put those all together and create a landscape using whatever color medium you have. If you have pastels, great, because I am going to start with the pastel that you've seen us use, but we can also try colored pencils or even the crayon. Believe it or not, crayons can be used. They're more fun than you think. They're not just made for kids. So whatever materials you have at hand and just a sheet of paper, that's all you need. We'll be ready to go, and I'll see you on the paper side. I decided to pick a picture that's reminiscent of the Impressionists because Impressionists really focused on color rather than subject matter. It was all about color and how it interacted with other colors around it. And they paid less attention to realism. They were almost rebellious in that regard. They were going after the color aspect. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Claude Monet, and Monet would be one of the artists I would suggest you look at because he used a lot of strokes similar to what we're going to be doing with our materials here. As a matter of fact, Lady with Parasol, which is one of my favorites that he's done here, and I know this is hard to see in the book, but if you can see it, there's a lot of really small, got a glare going on here, he used brush strokes, but we can do this with pastel. So a lot of short dabs, and that's what we're headed for today. So I have my picture selected, which is just a landscape, and it has trees because I wanted to keep with what we were doing. Large tree, small tree. This is called foreshortening. So we have a large tree in the front and a smaller tree in the back. And what that is serving to do is to give us a sense of depth and perspective. It makes you feel like you're in the picture rather than just looking at something static. So let's get started. I'm going to start by using pastel because I had promised I would do that in this lesson and several folks had requested it. And all I'm going to start doing is working in my background with the sky. So we can see here there's some blue and I've got some blues here. And I'm just making a series of dashes going across the paper of one kind of blue, picking up another blue. And as I mentioned before, this is where pastel really shines, is when you start layering color on color. So I can keep going with that. I'll do just a little bit more. I'll add some white just to show that in here. So even if you have white paper, don't be afraid to use a white pastel, a white colored pencil, white crayon, whatever you might happen to have. There's also, believe it or not, because the Impressionists were not about realism, they're about color. They brought in some greens into their sky. So I'm going to follow along and bring in some green dashes here as well. So you can start to see where we're going with that. So what I'm doing is simply building up layer of pastel, and you can see it's starting to blend together. And the idea is to start to mimic this sky that we're getting here, and it's coming along a little bit. To get the tree and the background, I'll stop with the sky for a minute, but now we're gonna do what's called figuring out your horizon line. And I'll use blue. You can use whatever color you want. And I'm just judging from my picture. On this one, the horizon line is almost right in the middle. It goes right across here. Usually you'll find it's either 1/3 or 2/3 up or down, but we've got right in the middle, so right in the middle we will go, as close as I can get it, drawing that line in. And then I'm just gonna figure out where I want my two trees by just drawing a line straight down. You can use whatever color you want. Brown is fine. I'm using green just for so. This should look a lot like our first drawing lesson where we used the different lines to get the base of the tree. Because once you have that, you can fill it in. And then all these things down here, we'll worry about later. So I have my lines in. I know where I'm going with my sky. I'll just show you how we get this tree in because the tree interacts with the sky. So to do the tree, I'll start making some dashed lines with my pastel that are going on about a 45-degree angle up and away from the tree. Every tree is different, and you're welcome to do whatever you'd like to do with your tree because it's your tree. So, we're just starting by looking at something, but the beauty of art is to change what you see to make it your own. There are no wrong answers. I'm going to switch to a darker green and start to build in some of these layers here. Or we can even go to yellow with the pastel and build in some other brighter colors in here. And you can see the gorgeousness of this blending, which I really like. Don't be afraid to go over it. Don't be afraid to get messy. Pastel is not for the faint of heart. It will get your hands messy, but that's fine. That's why we're washing our hands so many times a day, so it doesn't matter anyway. I also see in here some brown. Now, if you just notice what happened, and I don't think you did the boxes out of view, my brown just broke. Even if your pastels break into little pieces, they're still usable. You can go in and use some little dots. I'm just adding it here. It's starting to really crumble, and that's okay too. And I'm just coming down here into the trunk and getting some dots in there. Blow off a little bit of that dust and we'll keep going. So that's pretty much, shake off some dust, where we're headed with getting this pastel tree started in the sky. I'm going to keep working on it. You're welcome to get started and follow along with picking out what you want to do and start to go into your drawing. But the idea, like I just explained, is we're not doing a lot of shading. We're doing dashes and we're not doing dots either. So I know there's some folks in our drawing class that absolutely hate the sound of this. And unless you like woodpeckers, I can understand that could get on anyone's nerves. So although we're all in our own homes right now, so really if it doesn't bother you, go for the dashes and the dots, it's fine. I'm just making short marks. And by making short marks and then blending them on top of each other, I'm going to get a similar effect to what this oil painting looked like that I'm working from as inspiration. So I'll be back later to show you a little bit more of what we'll be doing with that. But I'm going to move on to showing you how you can do the same thing with the other materials we have available. So I'm just going to move down to this part. I divided my paper into two different sections so you can see how these different things would work. Right here, I'm going to use colored pencil. And if I have colored pencil for the sky, I'm going to do the same thing that I was doing with the pastel, but you can see I'm just making my marks little short colors. So I'm not doing this. I'll do this on my scrap paper down here. I'm not coloring it all in like that. We want to keep these sharp little defined shapes because that's what's going to give us different colors and different tones. And I can go back in with a darker blue, get some of that. And then I can use my white color pencil, just like I was using my white pastel, and white colored pencil blends the other colored pencils. So here I can kind of blend it in a little bit more. And hopefully you can see I'm getting little different colors, but a similar texture using my colored pencils. And then what I would do here is I'm going to draw the horizon line. This is going to be a smaller version, and my line for my two trees using a colored pencil, and we'll pretty much continue what we were doing here using a bunch of dots and dashes and little lines, but I'm using a green colored pencil. If you hear that scratchy sound, it's because this is a much harder medium than pastel. Pastel is so soft that it actually is a pastel painting, not a drawing. Although a lot of people will say I'm doing a drawing with pastels. Technically, they're painting material. This is just a lighter, different version of the green. And again, color pencil, very similar to pastel, will blend with itself. So you're able to blend in. And I will get my darker color to get some of these dark areas in here in the tree. And I'll just start marking some of these areas in here too. So you can see now I have pastel, color pencil, and I'm doing similar techniques. But you say, all I have are crayons. Well, that's okay too. So if you have a crayon, you can do the same thing. Maybe the great grandkids or somebody left some crayons, or you might happen to have one of those art sets sitting around, whatever you might have. Crayons are great because they're able to blend just like anything else. And a lot of people, they're the unsung heroes of the art world, but they do work. So you can see here, I have the same line shape, but it's in crayon. And I'm going to keep it consistent, use a brown crayon here and draw where I want my different trees to go. Now, I don't happen to have a green crayon handy, so I'm gonna make my tree here more of a fall tree. And I'm going to go in and make some lines with brown. Speaking of grandkids, the reason I don't have any greens is it happens to be my grandson Nathan's favorite color. So every time I buy a set of art supplies for them to have here at the house, the green crayons go back to Pennsylvania when he leaves. And I have not seen him to get my crayons back, so we'll work with what I have. So we're gonna have a fall scene here, but that's okay. And I'm just using the orange to blend in here and get some different shapes. Maybe we'll add some red. I mean, we're gonna switch it to a fall scene, and the beauty of Impressionism, any color works. We're all about colors rather than making it look realistic, but this could work too. So here we have it. 3 different techniques: crayon, color pencil, and pastel. I'm gonna keep working on this a little bit, and I'll be back to show you my progress. So I've had a little time to work out the basics of my pastel landscape. And again, you can see I've been just using a lot of short strokes, dashes, but sometimes you can go the opposite direction. Down here, we've got a little bit of yellow going on. So I thought after I filled this in, I'll show you how to get the other side started. So I'm just looking for a color similar to what I have, whatever close range, if you have orange, yellow, whatever it might be. And I'm just gonna go vertical on my strokes here because I'm trying to get the sense of whatever these grasses are laid in with pastel. And then I notice underneath them, there's a darker green. So immediately I'm switching to my darker green and I'm using short strokes. I don't know if you can see my hand almost shaking with this. I'm going up and down pretty quickly, so it looks like a solid line, but I did not create it with a solid line. And then I can go in and add some of this lighter green that we see in here, and then go back in with some darker green. But the fun is gonna be there's some red down here in the bottom, and I see some dark greens coming over here again that I'm gonna go over with red because they're very dark. As we mentioned the second lesson, red and green are complementary colors, so they will darken each other. So here's my red. I'm just getting some in here. I guess they were flowers of some sort growing in this meadow that seemed to be red. But when I go over this darker green on top of it, you can see down here that it gets to be maybe more of a shadow, a neutral color. It doesn't scream, I'm red. Then I'm going back in with some brighter green, filling that space in, and then darker again. So we're really just building up some of these layers. If you don't want to go all the way to the edge of your paper, so you have somewhere to pick it up, that's fine too. You don't have to worry about that. All right, then up here, I see a second layer of yellow. So I'm gonna come back in over top of that. Then in here, where I had laid in some green, there is some yellow, so I'm just kind of giving it a little more hint of that yellow color, and then down in here as well too. So now I pretty much laid in where I want everything to go. Fill in some of these white spaces here. There's really no white down here, so noticing that. Adding a few more dots and details to what we might have with different colors here, just to blend things in. So again, with the pastel, short strokes. You have more control that way. Believe it or not, it's a little easier to do it this way than to go back in and try to do everything with colors. You're going to get a little challenged with that to start off if you're not familiar with pastel. If you're a veteran of using pastels, by all means do whatever technique works best for you. And I still see a little bit of green in here. And you can see this looks really pretty where I'm taking the green over the brown and kind of getting some nice marks. I'll pull this up so you can see this a little more closer. I'll pick it up. You can see here, we're getting some really nice grass textures by moving in. So this is coming along nicely. I'm feeling pretty good with it. What I would like to do next is go back into the sky and maybe switch out to a different blue just to get some of this darker color, because we do have some dark color up here in the sky. So I'm just going to give a little more color to that, and I'm just doing these dashes and then going back over that with some white to soften it so it doesn't look too bold. We're just trying to give it a little more of a soft edge to all of that. Dirty hands again, pastel's dream. So there we have it. So I think as we start moving on with it, we're getting a relatively close interpretation. And again, it's up to you how you want to interpret it. So I'll move on, get a little further along with our crayon and color pencil, and we'll be right back with that. So I laid in about the same degree of finished on both my color pencil and crayon side, so you can see how we would finish these off. And again, these are loose, simple strokes, so be free with them, have fun. Here I was using some different color browns and greens and just kind of roughing in these areas. So now I'm going to take an orange pencil or yellow, whatever you might happen to have, and get in some of these warm tones that I see here. So again, I'm just laying in my tones with this color pencil. And over here where I see a lot of oranges, I'm just going to do a lot of short dashes, filling all of this in, because we have a whole section of warm tones over here. So again, it's just doing scratchy, short things. And then going back to my dark green colored pencil for this area here that you're seeing, and going back in. So again, it's all about making marks. That's how you can do simple landscapes even without a lot of drawing experience. I always use the letters W and M in these demonstrations. You're probably sick of hearing me say that, but honestly, doing this little up and down gives you the control, but also builds up the areas and gives it a nice texture, so you're not just getting it flat. We're not trying to go for coloring book perfect here. We're trying to build up textures. And if you're feeling a little bit frustrated, this is a great way to work out some frustration. I'm just taking some different browns here, getting in these darker colors, and just trying to simulate pretty much what we have on the bottom, but with a different kind of a pencil. Now, I only have a bright red here, and that's a little brighter than what we have, but since I have dark green over it, it should show up. Yeah, it's showing up pretty nicely, so this isn't a problem at all. Again, you don't have to make it the color you see, you make it the color you want. And that's part of the joy of art, is creating something that no one else has really done. I'm gonna go back in here. There's some lighter greens up here I haven't filled in, so I'm going back to my horizontal strokes, getting some of this light green, maybe some yellow because that's really light. And you're probably thinking, those of you who are realists, like, holy smokes, this is really rough and messy. But that's the idea of an impressionist landscape, is to try to get it a little bit messy. I see that dark green little bush here that I did not lay in. So where's my dark green? Here it is. I will pull this in so at least we have the edge of this picture and you can get a sense of where we were going. Now on the horizon line up here, there's some choppy little shapes. So all I'm doing is just making my horizon line less perfect and kind of filling in some areas there. So there's a nice green shadow that comes through that orange, and then there's a lighter green on top of that. I think I'll use some yellow. If you add yellow to green, it'll lighten it. So I'm just trying to blend that in. I'm also blending it in just to break up that orange a little bit. And now I'm just going the opposite direction. If you remember from the pen and ink demonstration with the ballpoint pen, that's called cross hatching, where we just go in a different direction. So I'll leave this part go and move on to crayon. Now with the crayon, I don't have any greens, and sometimes you have to just deal with the hand you're dealt. Since I don't have greens, I'm going to interpret everything that's green in browns and red tones, very fall-like. If you really want to stretch the right side of your brain and creativity, it's fun to interpret colors different than what you're seeing, because it makes you think even more outside the box of what we have. So everything that's green, I'm interpreting brown. So I'm going to go down here and color this in, because I'm following this dark green with a dark brown, or as dark a brown as I have. Again, if all you have are 3 or 4 pencils, you can make it work. 2 or 3 crayons, a couple of pastels. You don't have to have full fancy sets of everything. So here's this dark green tree. I'm making it a dark brown tree. So I'm just interpreting some colors that are different. And then the yellow, I have something that's like a yellowy orange, so I still can change that. Maybe I want to keep that just in this lighter vein. And use this light yellow instead of a light green. And then I'm going in here, I have blue. I use the blue for the sky, but the beauty is if I take this blue over this brown, because there's some warm tones, I can get a greenish hue. It's not going to be this green, but I can at least start getting some depth and dimension. So I'm just taking blue over these areas. And of course I could take blue over yellow like here and get a truer green, but I wanted to keep this more fall color, so I'm not going to do too much of that. But you can blend the colors in a little bit. And I can use this just to get these dark areas, because these trees have some dark squiggles on them that the crayon tree is still lacking. And I'm just making dots. Again, if you can do this, I think if you can see here on my paper, making letter I's, or candles on a birthday cake, if you're drawing a birthday cake, it's the same principle. Then you can do this and get these things colored in. So I'll just make this little line here. Then I do have a red. Surprisingly, none of my grandkids are fans of red. My granddaughter likes pink and my grandson likes green. So I do have some reds, and I can go back in and keep that red, that color, because it is a fall color and I like how it looks here. So I can go in and add some of that. And I have brown crayon here. So I'm just gonna get these tree trunks in a little bit more and try to get some depth. Okay. All right, so this is the end product. If you can see this here a little bit more. 3 different materials: pastel, color pencil, the lowly but unsung hero crayons, probably one of our first drawing pieces of equipment short of the watercolors that you may have had in school at one point. Here was what we started with, and these are 3 different mediums and interpretations. It's a lot of fun to try. Don't be afraid to experiment, and if you're feeling even more ambitious, you could mix some of these mediums together. You can always put colored pencil over pastel. Crayon is a different story because it's wax-based, so it's a little more difficult to blend in with other mediums, but you could try it. The point of this all, experiment, give yourself freedom to try something different. So there you have it, Vincent Hall. It's easy to get started with a drawing idea. Don't be afraid to try something simple, add to it, change the colors around, decide in your mind, okay, everything that I see that's red is going to be green or purple, or maybe you just want to do black and white, or keep it as pen and ink like we did before with ballpoint pens. You're welcome to take anything we're doing and reinvent it to meet your needs. If you are a veteran drawer, and I know there's some of you out there that are in the drawing class that are very seasoned and professional in your work, just feel free to use these as ideas to maybe add some texture or technique to what you already do. If you don't like doing landscape, but you like doing animals or people, these techniques work the same way. As a matter of fact, next week we're going to be doing a simple animal drawing, and I'm going to show you how to use these same short dots and dashes because they interpret fur or turtle shells or whatever you might have it just as easily as they do a landscape. So stay tuned for that. If you happen to run into Midge Holmes, or if you run into Sharon Higgins, Sharon is an expert colored pencil drawer, and Midge is working in pastel along with Maureen Kammerer, who's also a veteran pastel drawer. So they might give you some advice if you see them in the hall. In the meantime, stay tuned for next week. I had fun being with all of you, and I'll see you soon.